I just decided to make this live stream early. Dapat 8:15 or 9 sana pero nag-decide ako na paagahan na lang natin. Lord willing, matapos natin yun. Kung hindi man 8:30, 9 o'clock. Actually, marami-rami itong tatalakay natin. Kasama na rito yung mga comments ng mga atheist friends natin na kung saan most of their arguments never really prove that atheism is true. In fact, sa gagawin nating discussion, pag-usapan po natin ito. Anyway, a blessed day to all of you by God's grace. So, unahin po muna natin ang topic na to dahil ito yung laging iginigiit sa atin ng mga atheist friends natin sa page na to. And I was just getting shocked but also happy then na meron palang gumawa ng page na inspired basis sa page na to. But instead of the whys of Christianity, naging the whys of Christianity. Kumain ba siya ng keso? I don't know for sure, but whoever he is, the question here is this: did they ever really presented any evidence for atheism? Well, so pag-usapan muna natin itong sa isyong to. Kasi itong laging iginigit ng ilang mga atheist friends natin like Mr. Anthony, na kung saan iginigit niya yung mga Bible verses daw na yon ay nagpapatunay na ang Diyos daw ay guilty sa genocide. Pero wait, may 2 points diyan. Number 1, totoo ba na ang Diyos ay guilty sa sinasabi nila na genocide? And number 2, if atheism is true, ang claim ba nila ay opinion lamang o base sa reality? So pag-usapan natin. Ito yung sinabi rito ni Richard Dawkins. Ito yung famous quote na kung saan ito ang kanyang pinagsasabi. Na kung mapansin nyo po yung page natin, kung ano yung sinasabi ng mga atheist friends natin, wait lang, i-post ko itong StreamYard. Anyway, itong sabi niya, the God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Teka lang, kanino ko narinig yung laging sinasabi nito? Kay Mr. Anthony, no? O, tingnan nyo, kasi ang sabi ni Mr. Richard Dawkins dito. Tingnan nyo, ulitin ko yung pagbasa. The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully. Pambihira. Di ba kung napapansin ninyo, kung napanood nyo po yung last live stream po natin, yan po ang laging iginigiit ng mga atheist friends natin. They are condemning God as some sort of a cosmic genocidal freak. Parang ganun ang trip eh. Pero wait, totoo ba talaga yan? Kasi kung titingnan natin yung konteksto ng Old Testament, especially yung cultural background ng panahong yun, mas lalo po nating maintindihan ano ba talaga nangyayari. And if God does not exist according to atheistic worldview, yung kanilang kondena laban sa Diyos ay isa lamang opinion. Because in atheistic worldview, there's no what was called objective right and wrong. Ngayon, itong tanong, did God really command genocide? Did He really order Israel to wipe the Canaanites from the face of the earth? So yan po ang tingnan natin. Unahin natin yung nangyari sa panahon ni Joshua kasi 'di ba? Si Joshua yung kapalit ni Moses. And si Joshua mismo ang inassign ng Panginoon para isagawa ang naturang atas na sakupin ang Canaan. So, unahin natin yung claim. In Joshua 10, he says they left no survivors and destroyed everything that breathed in the entire land. And, excuse me, put all the inhabitants to the sword. Pero kung titingnan natin ang reality, Judges 1 states sa Judges na to, sa Aklat ng mga Hukom, several times that Israel had failed to conquer the entire land of Canaan and could not drive out all the inhabitants. So, on the one hand, Joshua tells us that they left no survivors. But on the other hand, in Judges 1, sa Judges 1, it tells us multiple times that Israel failed to drive out all the Canaanites. So, itong malaking tanong. Sinakop nga ni Joshua at ng Israel ang Canaan. Pero, na-exterminate ba lahat? No. Joshua's claim again. Joshua 10 verse 39 says, every person in Debir was utterly destroyed. In reality, Joshua 11:21 states that later, Joshua utterly destroyed Anakites in Debir. Again, Joshua says they utterly destroyed every person in Debir. But in next chapter, nabasa natin na may mga survivors pala doon. Kumbaga, ang na-destroy lamang ay yung mga Anakites sa Debir. Okay, please not so fast. Baka sasabihin ng mga atheist friends natin, may kontrahan pala. Listen, listen, listen. Pakinggan po natin itong mabuti. Okay? Sa Joshua 11:21, he tells us that the Anakites were quote-unquote cut off and utterly destroyed in Hebron. A few chapters later, in Joshua 15, nabasa natin that Caleb drove out the Anakites from Hebron. Drove out. Well, Joshua claims utter destruction, but in a few chapters later, he tells us that Caleb drove out the same people he just quote-unquote utterly destroyed. So ano bang nangyayari dito? Parang ang assumption tuloy, may kontrahan yata. Pero please, tingnan po natin ang konteksto, which is ironically, ayaw ito ng mga atheist friends natin. Kung nabasa po natin mismo yung mga comments nila, alam ko, sigurado ko, mayroon tatawa dyan maya-maya lang after this or even sa gitna mismo ng live stream natin. But that's okay. Pero anyway, tingnan natin. Certainly, Joshua's claims and reality appear to contradict one another. Yet, we read on multiple occasions that Joshua did just as God had commanded, like what we have read in Joshua 11, verses 12, 14, and 15. So, ano ba talagang nangyayari dito? Literal ba na pinatay lahat-lahat? Did God really committed genocide? Well, it's not. God did not mean literal genocide. How could he, if in Joshua 11, he tells us that they quote-unquote utterly destroyed the Anakites in Hebron, and then just a few chapters later in Joshua 15, he tells us that Caleb quote-unquote drove out those same Anakites in the same Hebron. Wait lang, irresponsible na ba dito si Josue sa kanyang pag-report? It's doubtful. After all, God made it clear elsewhere that utterly destroy did not mean complete annihilation. Kasi ang laging pinipinpoint ng mga atheist friends natin, nung sinabi ng Lord na, nung inutos ng Lord kay Joshua na dapat utterly destroyed, agad-agad, annihilation ka agad. As in wiping out, kung baga. Ito nga yung utos, di ba? Yan. Complete destruction, you shall not intermarry them, ganyan. Pero, teka lang. God ordered them to devote the Canaanites to complete destruction. But then, He forbids them from intermarrying with them. Oh, tingnan nyo ha. Di ba sinabi, complete destruction. Pero, bigla-bigla, you shall not intermarry them. So, kung papansinin natin, How could they intermarry with people they had completely obliterated, kumbaga? Paano baga maikakasal ng mga ito yung let's say yung mga lalaki? Paano maikakasal ng mga lalaki yung mga babae na, kung tama yung claim na yun, ibig bang sabihin wala na talaga completely? Well, it seems obvious that whatever utterly destroy means, it does not mean genocide. Okay? I hope our atheist friends will understand that. And let's hope also na i-examine nila yung cultural background, hindi yung puro bato-bato ng mga Bible verses nang wala sa tamang posisyon whatsoever. I don't know for sure, but just quoting the Bible verse, tapos agad-agad, tingnan mo, God committed genocide, keme-keme. Ganun ba talaga? Really? Anyway, utterly destroy was common hyperbolic rhetoric. Wait lang. Ang terminong hyperbole ay isa sa mga uri ng figures of speech. Di ba? Kung saan yung mga writers, sinusobrahan nila o ginagawa nilang exaggeration kung tutusin. So, listen to this. Military leaders during Joshua's day used to speak in exaggerated terms. They would regularly make claims that they quote-unquote utterly destroyed their enemies and left no survivors. In reality, they defeated their enemies but did not commit them to genocide. Yet, nobody was calling them liars because this was how military leaders communicated back then. So sa mga atheist friends natin, kung yan ang inisip nyo, pakitanong po yung mga sundalo. Anyway, kung papansinin natin yung mga records like King Mesha ng Moab, Tutmosis III ng Ehipto, Merneptah ng Ehipto, tingnan nyo halimbawa na lang, King Mesha ng Moab, he reported that the northern kingdom of Israel has utterly perished for always. In truth, Israel was around long enough to be taken into exile 100 years later. Okay? How about Tutmosis III of Egypt? He declared that the numerous army of Mitanni was overthrown within an hour, annihilated totally, like those now not existent. And yet, actually, Mitanni continued to fight for another 2,000 years. How about Merneptah ng Ehipto? He bragged, Israel is wasted, his seed is not. Wait lang, hanggang ngayon, nag-exist pa ng Israel. So, when Moses or Joshua spoke in exaggerated ways, they were simply adopting the common hyperbolic rhetoric that all ancient Near Eastern military leaders used. Everyone reading the accounts would have understood it that way, just like we understand hyperbolic sports language. So, kumbaga, drive them out pala yan. It seems that God's desire was for Israel to drive out or dispossess the Canaanites from the land, not to commit them to genocide. Truth is, driving out language is used far more frequently with respect to the Canaanites than utterly destroy language. Kung mapapansin natin, for example, yung Deuteronomy 7:2-4, that God ordered Israel to commit the Canaanites to complete destruction. Tapos sinabi ng Diyos, wag silang He ordered them not to intermarry with the Canaanites afterwards. These dual commands only make sense if the quote-unquote complete destruction means to drive them out rather than annihilating them altogether. In short, pinapalayas ng Diyos noong time na yon ang mga Kanaanita. Now, on another occasion, God threatens to destroy Israel for their disobedience. But this destruction did not mean genocide. It means driving them away from the promised land. Kaya nga, ito pa. kung mapapansin po natin yung passage like Deuteronomy 28:63 to 64 na sinasabi, the Lord took delight in doing you good and multiplying you. So the Lord will take delight in destroying you. You shall be plucked off the land. And the Lord will scatter you among all peoples from one end of the earth to other. So, itong passage na binasa natin ay isa sa mga example where quote-unquote destroying really meant driving them out of the land. Kumbaga, kapag mayroong pagka lumaganap ang disobedience dahil sa choice ng mga Israelites na suwayin ang Diyos, so to speak, palalala sila ay ikakalat. Here is a clear example where destroying really meant driving them out of the land. With this in mind, we can be confident that this was God's purpose in issuing the quote-unquote utterly destroy commands. Bukod pa rito, ito na. Ito yung laging paborito ng mga atheist friends natin. Like yung mga nabasa natin before from the Filipino atheists. Paano naman, ano ba? Ano ba talagang nangyayari? Did they really commit women and children to genocide? Well, the stock language of kill everything that's alive was again hyperbolic language and really meant driving out the Canaanites. Ibig sabihin, kung titingnan natin yan, yung issue niya na driving out the Canaanites, hindi masasabing hindi pinatay lahat-lahat ang mga babae o maging mga bata sa conquest na yan. They simply defeated the various Canaanite armies as they infiltrated the promised land. Katunayan nga naman, God had instructed Israel to always offer peace before attacking anyone, which would have given women and children time to flee before any battle ensued. Kaso nga lang, almost nobody them up on the offer. Furthermore, it appears that most of their battles occurred at military strongholds tulad ng Jericho at Ai, away from the populated civilian countrysides. Archaeology digs suggest that Jericho housed roughly 100 soldiers with no civilians, which explains how Israel could march around it 7 times in one day. Rahab and maybe another female or two worked in the tavern to take to take care of travelers passing through. Kung sanang lahat sana pinatay, sana kasama si Rahab. Kaso hindi naman. Rahab, who turned from paganism, also serves as a great example that ethnic cleansing is not the goal of these conquests. So sa mga atheist friends natin, tigil-tigilan nyo ngayong pag-akusa nyo sa Diyos na guilty raw sa genocide kahit wala naman po kayong objective moral standards dyan. Also, the goal was to rid the area of the pagan influence that could easily lead Israel from worshiping the Lord. Yun pala. So ngayon, bakit kailangang paalisin ang mga Kanaanita? Bakit? Alam nyo kasi sa Genesis 15, sinabi ng Diyos kay Abraham na He would give the land of the Israelites after 400 years of slavery in Egypt. Bakit? Ito'y dahil sa kasalanan ng mga Amorites. Take note, nung panahon na yan, hindi pa kumpleto. Kumbaga, He would give the land to the Israelites after 400 years of slavery in Egypt because the sins of the Amorites was not yet complete. That is, God would not drive them out yet because it wouldn't be justified. But after hundreds of years of wickedness, the Canaanites would be ripe for judgment. So, ano bang paghatol yan? Bakit ganun? Alam nyo kasi, while they were notorious for temple prostitution, incest, and bestiality, Ano yung pinaka-worst? Child sacrifice. Kung saan ang isang sanggol ilalagay doon sa kandungan ng Diyos-Diyosan na si Molech. At dahil bakal yung Diyos-Diyosan na yan, yung rebulto na yan na si Molech, papainitin nila yon kasi bakal nga. At para hindi gaanong marinig ang pag-iyak ng isang sanggol, papatugtugin yung mga tambol ng napakalakas. Bakit? Para hindi po marinig ng mga tao yung pag-iyak ng mga bata. So nag-quote na naman dito pong ating kaibigang atheist troll without even realizing na kanina pa ako nagtatalakay dyan. Alam mo, Ginong Anthony, even though these passages are considered to be true, kung totoong atheism, wala ka namang moral standard para sabihin mali raw ang Diyos dyan. In fact, as an atheist, you supposedly not to believe in God because in your own worldview, God does not exist. Kaya sabi ko nga kanina, tigil-tigilan ninyo yung pagkukot ng mga Bible verses na wala naman sa proper context dahil bukod sa ayaw nyo naman ng context, paano nyo may papaliwanag sa amin kung ano yung moral standard nyo para sabihin guilty daw ang Diyos sa genocide? Sa pag-quote niya kasi ng napakaraming mga Bible verse, hindi niya po yata napapansin at hindi po napapansin ng mga atheist friends natin na if atheism is true, yung kanilang pagkondena sa Diyos, it is just their own opinion. Opinion lang nila yun. Walang objective moral value, so to speak. Yan kung sasabihin nila na ang moral standard nila kung bakit daw nila kinokondena daw ang Diyos about sa issue ng genocide ay sila, isang ibig sabihin doon, bukod sa they don't want Christianity to be true, they hate God. Yan ang totoo. Palibhasa kasi even, let's say na yung nangyaring quote-unquote utter destruction sa Canaanites, yun, sige sabihin natin na ganun. Alam ba nila kung ano yung tinatawag na judgment o paghatol? Isipin lang natin yung kung paano hinatulan ng isang hukom ang isang tao na nakagawa ng isang matinding krimen. Ngayon, ilang ulit na warning nga minsan. Pero hindi pa rin nakikinig. Yan ang nangyayari. And yet, our atheist friends have no idea what they're saying. And to Mr. Anthony, di ba, I challenge you for a dialogue live here. Bakit hindi po kayo magparamdam ngayon live? Anyway, ituloy natin. Well then, ang nangyayari kasi dito sa Genesis 15, sinabi ng Diyos kay Abraham na makakamit nila yung lupain ng Canaan for 100 years. I mean, sa loob ng 400 years. Kumbaga, hindi pa kasi noon kumpleto. Yung sins of the Amorites na ito was not yet complete. So, gayang pinipinpoint natin ano yung kultura ng mga Canaanites noon na hindi man lamang tinignan ni Anthony coconut. Alam ba ng mga atheist friends natin na napaka-sama ng ginagawa ng mga Canaanites noon? Bukod sa temple prostitution, incest at bestiality, bukod sa matinding idolatry, child sacrifice ang ginagawa ng mga tao nung panahong yon. Kaya ngayon, tingnan nyo ha, itong mga atheist friends natin, they're always asking, why God does not stop evil? O ngayon, ginawa ng Diyos yan. Yung judgment against Canaanites. O tapos, nag-quote pa itong troll na to ng isa sa mga passages from Deuteronomy 2 without even analyzing the context of it. At baka hindi niya po napapansin, ito'y utos ng Diyos sa mga Israelites na sasakop doon sa Canaan. Ay pambihira. Listen my friends, when our atheist friends will say, why God does not stop evil in the world? Andyan na. O nag-present na ng solusyon ang Diyos halimbawa. O judgment. Yung mga Canaanites noon, they were driven out. Tapos ngayon sasabihin, ang Diyos daw ay guilty sa genocide. Anong klaseng inconsistency ito? Right? Matapos magsasabi, bakit hindi daw pinigilan ng Diyos ang kasamaan sa mundong ito? Tapos sasabihin yung tipong nakagawa na ng solusyon ng Diyos sa time na yan. Dumagdag pa ang peking page na to. Alam nyo, kahit totoo yan, kahit i-present na natin yung konteksto niyan, kung hindi totoo na may Diyos, if God does not exist, who in the world are you to say that what God alleged has done is wrong? The whys of Christianity and Mr. Anthony, kung ikaw man yung may-ari ng page na to, itong challenge ko, ano ba ang moral standard ninyo to blame God for this? If from the first part, you even do not believe that God exists. Palibhasa, nahuhuli na kayo sa tinatawag na double standards kasi. Nagtatanong kayo kung bakit hindi pinigilan ng Diyos ang kasamaan sa mundong ito. But when God acts as God who judges, tapos biglang-bigla, genocide daw. Really? Ano ba yan? You know what? Ultimately, God wanted to establish the nation of Israel in the land free of pagan influence to provide a context for the coming Messiah. Yes, Israel defeated these Canaanite armies, but the ultimate goal was to be a blessing to all the nations. And that blessing would come through the person of Jesus the Messiah, who came to fulfill the law and die as the once for all sacrifice for the sins of the world. So that's what happened there. Take note, nag-quote nga itong troll page na yan. Ezekiel chapter 2. Pero itong matanong ko lang sa mga atheist friends natin. Sige, mag-quote kayo ng kahit anong mga Bible verse. Itong tanong ko sa inyo, ano bang moral standard nyo tama. Ano bang moral standard nyo para sabihin mali ang Diyos sa ginawa niyan? Balikan natin kasi yung sinabi mismo ni Richard Dawkins na siyang nag-inspire sa mga atheist friends natin na maging contradictory mismo ang kanilang claim. Tingnan nyo, the God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction, jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully. Pero ano bang moral standard ni Richard Dawkins dyan para sabihin ang Diyos ay guilty sa lahat ng yan? Sa mga atheist friends natin, I have a question to all of you here. Alam kong gigil na gigil kayo. Like quoting many so-called Bible verses, blah, 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 blah. Pero matanong ko, ano ba ang moral standard ninyo? Isa pa to. Maghintay ka kasi sasagutin din natin yan later on. Maghintay ka. Sana pumasok ka dito. Magkaroon tayo ng dialogue. At sa may-ari dito na nagpapasa ng mga nakakatawang mga mga vlogs na ganyan, matanong ko lang, anong moral standard nyo? Please, pakipaliwanag naman sa akin. Ay, pambihira. Inakusan dito na si Jesus daw ay isang bakla. Ay, nako, the wise of Christianity. Magpakita ka lang sa dialogue natin. Ito yung StreamYard, oh. Ayan. Nako. Palibhasa, they are ashamed in their worldview actually. Yan ang hindi po nila napapansin. So anyway, tingnan natin yung mga absurd comments nila. Yan. Bisitahin natin. Actually, in past days, tinignan po natin lahat-lahat ng kanilang mga comments. Although hindi lahat. Actually, napakarami yan. Pero yung iba kasi doon, paikot-ikot lang, puro circular reasoning. Alam ba nila yung tinatawag na circular reasoning? I don't know. Kasi nahuhuli sila sa akto ng, so to speak, double standards. Like this one. Kung sino man tong admin ng pari ng Tondo page na to, matanong ko lang, if atheism is true, there's no heaven and hell. Ano nag-assume ka dyan? Ba't di ka dumalo minsan sa ano natin para magkaroon ng dialogue, di ba? Kasi napakasili. Hindi man lamang good evidence para sa atheism yan. What this page and other pages like the Wise of Christianity did is this. They're just ito halimbawa na lamang tong mga, ay nako, nag-quote siya ng Genesis 19. Alam mo ba yung epekto na ginawa ni Lot? Nagkaroon ng matitinding kaaway ang Israel by means of Moab and ano yung tama ba ako? Moab and Ammonites. Nag-quote talaga siya ng, huwag ka mag-alala. Again, inimbitahan kita, dyan yung StreamYard ko. Ano ba yan? Gusto kong malaman, ba't mo nasabi na mali daw ang Diyos dyan? Sige nga. Yun ang gusto kong malaman. If there are no objective moral values, why do you think it's wrong? Oh, yun. Nagsalita itong si Edsel Josh Humol na kung saan sinasabi niya na yun daw mga Kristiyano ay hindi raw gumagamit ng double standards tapos sabay mura. Wait, kung totoong atheism, bakit siya nagko-complain tungkol dyan? Sabihin natin na may ibang mga Christians na, let's say, they're using also double standards. And let's say, okay, let's agree na mali yan. But unlike atheism, in Christianity, we know for sure na yung pag-commit ng double standards ay talagang mali. Mali naman talaga. Pero pag in atheism, hindi may paliwanag kung bakit mali. Right? Kasi sa totoo lang, emotional masyado eh. He was just making assumptions that Christians allegedly use double standards. Pero, let's say na, okay, sige. There are some who commit that. Pero, in atheism, is it objectively wrong na mag-commit ng double standards? If you say yes, then you're just proving to us that there are objective moral values. So, Ginong yon. Oh. Simple pa lang yan. Ito, kung sino man tong Drick Dammer na to, ang gandang argument, no? O, sabi naman ni Edsel, decision yung Bible, atheism means we don't believe in existence of any gods, and that fantasy book called Bible had the audacity to say that we believe in gods. You know what? Kung sino yung dinidiyos ng atheism? Ikaw. Yun. Oh, come on. Re-examine it again, Mr. Edsel. Kasi tingnan nyo, ang totoo niyan, mayroong mga atheist, kung naalala nyo po yung last na live stream natin, mayroong iilang atheist na umaamin na atheism does not require or does not need evidence to prove that atheism is true. So ang totoo, atheism is just a fairy tale, a blind faith. Yan, if atheism is not blind faith, if atheism is not a fairy tale, yan ang dapat lang patunayan. Why atheism better explains reality. Ilang ulit po nating china-challenge ang mga atheist friends natin, pero wala pa rin. Anong week naman daw? Strawman ba ang matatawag dyan? Really? Oy, Lilion, andito yung live stream mo. Magpunta ka dito. Mag-usap tayo. Anyway, bumalik ulit tayo kay Mr. Alonso. Sabi niya, your all-knowing God does not know how to create a scenario that can cause character, blah, 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 blah. Pero if atheism is true kasi, yung Diyos na tinutukoy niya, not the God of the Bible, ne? Pero yung Diyos na tinutukoy niya, hindi naman talaga nag-exist eh. Mismong yung The Filipino Atheist page, inamin na sa atheism, walang purpose ang pain at suffering. Eh, madalas kasi hindi po nila nare-realize na most of the pain and suffering that humans experienced happened because of what humans had done because on misusing their own free will. Siyempre, isama pa dyan. Yung iba nga, tumira pa mismo sa may isang lugar na may fault line, laging dinadaan ng bagyo o alon, ganito. My friends, it's very ironic that skeptics always blaming God but never realized about the purposes concerning pain and suffering. Sa bagay, inamin na mismo ng The Filipino Atheist page. Wala raw purpose. So, ibig sabihin, paano yung long suffering? Paano yung patience? Paano yung pag-develop ng character or whatever? Oh, ayan. Dahil andito rin si Mr. L. Leon, basahin natin. Atheism does not claim anything. In short, according to you, Mr. Eli Leon, by your own admission, atheism has no strong foundation. Atheism does not really explain reality. Atheism is just a joke, a fairy tale. Tapos sinasabi daw, strawman argument daw yun? No! It doesn't. At sa pagsasabing ako daw ay amateur, hindi naman nagpapatunay sa atheism yan. Isa pa, alam mo ba, claim din yan. Belief yan. what what our atheist friends did here is this. They always blaming someone whom, from the start, they think and believe he does not exist. Eh, kung totoong atheism, ang tao ay para lamang mga robot na nagre-react lang kapag may nararamdaman, nasasaktan, kahit ano, whatever. Tapos daw sasabihin kung ano ng mga kalokohan. Really? Pero sana makita po ng mga atheist friends natin yung mga masasabi po natin na yes, you heard that right. Mga fatal flaws at kontrahan sa mga arguments nila. Oh, tapos i-blame pa ni Mr. Leon pala, sorry, ang Diyos may kinalaman sa nangyari doon sa Garden of Eden. Diyos daw ang may gustong mag-suffer ang mga tao. But if there's no God, ano ba yung standard nila? Palibhasa, wala namang moral standard talagang atheism. So, sige, sagutin natin. Bakit kaya na pinahintulot ng Diyos na mangyari yon? Bagamat alam na niya na mangyayari yan. If atheism is true, wala. Kahit anong paliwanag natin, wala yon. Dahil opinion lamang, lahat-lahat yan according to atheistic worldview. But in Christianity, in its context, doon po natin malalaman ngayon. Kaya, alam nyo, sa atheism, itong ganitong mga birada na ito ng mga kaibigan natin, ang totoo niyan, wala naman talagang basis ang kanilang mga pinagsasabi. Lalo na, mismo siya na mismo, ang umamin, pati yung mga atheist friends natin, they admitted that they don't need, that atheism does not require evidence to prove that atheism is true. So, What's the point, right? Anyway, sige, let's answer this. If God knew that Adam and Eve would sin, bakit pa niya nilikha? Ito po ay para sa mga open-minded po, ne? Kahit sino man kayo, Kristiyano ka man, atheist ka man, or whoever you are, na open-minded, at ikaw talaga ay masasabing truth seeker o naghanap ng kasagutan, especially this topic, ito'y para sa'yo. Pero kung ikaw naman, sige yung pagkomento ng mga walang kakwenta-kwenta, matanong ko lang. Ito, isang tanong ko lang sa'yo. If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? Yun lang. Kahit anong dami ng mga Bible passages na kinukote mo, eh doon pa nga lang sa kalagayan yan, hindi ka naman naniniwala doon, di ba? Take note, walang nagpupumilit sa'yo po dito na pumunta dito sa page na to. I'm just inviting everyone here. Anyway, alam po natin mahirap po talagang masagot talaga yan. Eh, kasi una, tayo mga tao, limitado lamang yung mga kaalaman natin. It may be hard to see how Adam and Eve's falling into sin could bring glory to God. In fact, some might even wonder why, if God knew ahead of time all the trouble they would cause, He made them in the first place. Hindi katulad nating mga tao, if God exists, then He is omniscient. He knows the future. So He definitely knew that Adam and Eve would sin. But He created them anyway and gave them a free will with which they choose to sin. But take note, we must carefully note that Adam and Eve's falling into sin does not mean that God is the author of sin or that He tempted them to sin. But the fall does serve the purpose of God's overall plan for creation and mankind. So titingnan natin, if we consider what some theologians call the meta-narrative or overarching storyline of the scripture, we see that biblical history can be roughly divided into three main sections. 1. Paradise. 2. Paradise lost. 3. Paradise regained. By far the largest part of the narrative is devoted to the transition from paradise lost to paradise regained. And at the center of this meta-narrative is the cross, which was planned from the very beginning. Kaya nga, sabi, in Genesis, we've got paradise lost. We've got paradise regained in Revelation. Everything in between is the story of redemption. Yun po yun. So, reading scripture carefully, hindi po yung tipong magkukot lang ng Bible verse out of context gaya po ng ginagawa ng mga kaibigan natin ngayon. Reading scripture carefully, we are led to the following conclusions. Point 1, the fall of mankind was foreknown by God. Point 2, the crucifixion of Christ, the atonement for God's elect, was foreordained by God. And lastly, all people will one day glorify God, and God purposes to bring unity to all things in heaven and earth under Christ. So, God's purpose was to create a world in which His glory could be manifested or manifest in all its fullness. The glory of God is the overarching goal of creation. Katunayan, it's the overarching goal of everything He does. The universe was created to display God's glory, and the wrath of God is revealed against those who fail to glorify God. The world that best displays God's glory is the world we have, a world that was allowed to fall, a world that was redeemed, a world that will be restored to its original perfection. Alam nyo kasi, yes, it's true. Mahirap po sagutin yan kahit ako aminin ko rin. Pero, unlike us na limitado yung kaalaman natin, God is omniscient. But wait, stop that. If atheism is true, why are you blaming God concerning Adam and Eve? Ano ba yung masasabi natin na objective mo, yung moral standard ninyo to accuse God of these points na inyo pong sinasabi? Anyway, God's wrath and God's mercy displays the riches of His glory, but we cannot see either without the fall of mankind. We would never know grace if we had never needed grace. Therefore, all of God's plan, including the fall, election, redemption, and atonement of mankind, serves the purpose of glorifying God. If Christianity is true, the purpose of life is to know God and to make Him known. Aminin po natin, karamihan po dito, lalo po sa mga atheists na nandito, most of them, kumbaga, hindi po sila naghanap talaga ng katotohanan. They are just finding any kinds of happiness in their own way. Yun po yun. Well, when man fell into sin, God's mercy was immediately displayed in God's not killing him on the spot. Alam nyo, guys, kung totoo yung sinasabi ng mga atheist friends natin na malupit ang Diyos, dapat sana pinatay na lamang niya sina Adan at Eva dahil nagkasala. Hindi niya yun ginawa. God's grace was immediately evident in the covering He provided for their shame. God's patience and forbearance were later on display as mankind fell deeper and deeper into sin. God's justice and wrath were on display when He sent the flood. And God's mercy and grace were again demonstrated when He saved Noah and his family. God's holy wrath and perfect justice will be seen in the future when He deals with Satan once and for all. In short, kaibigan, kung sinasabi mo na ang Diyos ay guilty daw sa genocide, isang cosmic dictator, isang napakalupit na Diyos, bakit pinahintulutan pa noon ng Diyos sina Adan at Eva na mabuhay after nilang gumawa ng kasalanan? But if atheism is true, if God does not exist, can you imagine na yung mga sinasabi o iniisip ay pawang reaction lamang na parang yung mga robot na nakaprograma lang? I hope maunawaan ito ng mga atheist friends natin to. Yung mga skeptic friends natin. Yung iba pa na naghanap ng katotohanan. Even our Muslim friends as well. Also, God's glory is also revealed in His love. Our knowledge of God's love comes from the person and saving work of Jesus Christ in this fallen world. Kaya nga sa 1 John 4:9, itong sabi, this is how God showed His love among us. He sent His one and only Son into the world that we might live through Him. Had God decided not to create Adam and Eve based on His knowledge of their fall? Or had He made them automatons with no volition or moist robot? We would never have truly known what love is. Dagdag ko pa. Matanong ko lang, what is love? Assignment yan sa mga atheist friends natin. So anyway, the ultimate exhibition of God's glory was at the cross, where His wrath, justice, and mercy met. The righteous judgment of all sin was executed at the cross, and God's grace was on display in His Son's words, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. God's love and grace are manifest in those whom He has saved. In the end, God will be glorified as His chosen people worship Him for all eternity with the angels, and the wicked will also glorify God as His righteousness results in the eternal punishment of unrepentant sinners. Without the fall of Adam and Eve, we would never know God's justice, grace, mercy, or love. So then, sabi nga po ng Westminster Faith Confession, sana tama po yung pagkakabanggit ko. Yung sabi, God from all eternity did by the most wise and holy counsel of his own will, freely and unchangeable ordain whatsoever come to pass. Yet so, as thereby neither is God the author of sin, nor is violence offered to the will of the creatures, nor is the liberty of or contingency of second causes taken away, but rather established. Sa madaling sabi, God ordains future events in such a way that our freedom and the working of secondary causes like laws of nature are preserved. Ito'y tinatawag na concurrence sang-ayon sa mga teologo. God's sovereign will flows concurrently with our free choices in such a way that our free choices always result in the carrying out of God's will. By free, we mean that our choices are not coerced by outside influences. It's a complex interaction of wills and choices, but God can handle any amount of complexity. So, God foresaw Adam and Eve's fall. He created them anyway in his own image to bring glory to himself. They were given freedom to make choices. And even though they chose to disobey, their choice became the means by which God's ultimate will was carried out and by which his full glory will be seen. So yun po yun. Yun po ang nagaganap dyan. But wait, if atheism is true, ano moral standard nila para sabihin guilty daw ang Diyos sa ganito at sa ganyan? Anyway, bago ko basahin ito, I think we'll go on to another part, no? Part 2. Kasi, ang gagawin nating mga isang oras muna to dahil I am doing some sort of activities right now. Pero siguro mag-ano tayo ng 2-3 komento pa bago natin matapos. Ipagpapatuloy natin to bukas by God's grace, by God's mercy. Anyway, sabi naman ni Ginoong Brian, stop reading answers that are not of your own. Ang tanong, masama ba yun? Masama bang mag-quote ng ibang sources? Bagitin na natin si Mr. Anthony at the whys of Christianity. Yung pag-present na nila ng mga kinopyan yan mula sa mga kung ano ng mga pages na ganyan, masama na ba yun? Di ba nga, yung mga atheist friends natin, nagkukot mga sila ng mula kay Christopher Hitchens, Daniel Dennett, Dan Barker, Sam Harris, you name it. Siyempre, gumagawa rin kayo ng sariling argument din na most of them, galing mismo sa mga arguments ng mga atheist friends natin. Nagaling mismo kina Dawkins and the rest of them. So, by using your own standard, mali pala yung ginagawa mo. But if atheism is true, opinion lang yun, Ginoong Escol. Sabi ni Mr. Sabi naman ni Ginoong Eli Leon, hinayaan or pinahintulutan does not matter. In short, ayaw niya. You see? This is how the close-mindedness of our atheist friends went off. They are so desperate to blame God in everything, even though there are most of the mistakes, most of the tragedies na nangyayari, tayo pong mga taong may kagagawan. About suffering, bakit tayo nagkakasakit? Kagagawan natin. Bakit tayo na-aksidente? Kagagawan natin. Tapos pambihira, sisisihin ng Diyos. Come on. Think about this for a moment. Lalo po sa mga atheists na laging nag-claim, hindi, kasalanan ng Diyos yan, evil yan, o ganito, ganyan. Come on, wag tayong double standards dyan. Kaya, alam nyo, they had no idea what are they writing these silly comments. They had no idea about the reasons why there's pain and suffering. Alam ba nilang tinatawag na long suffering, patience and hope? Sa bagay, sabi mismo ni the Filipino atheist, Wala raw purpose daw. Right? Itong mga to, puro assumptions na lang. At kung nakikita nyo po yung mga latest comments po nila ngayon sa ating page ngayon, sa video, sa live stream natin, pawang mga opinion lang. Ito mga sinasabi ng mga ito, at ito, at ito, at ito, at ito, at yung pag-quote ng Bible verse without even quote, even, ano no, nang walang, kung ano, kung, kumbaga, nang wala man lamang tinitignan lamang ng mga masasabi nating cultural background, context, at kung ano-ano pa. At ito pa, at ito pa. They are just showing to us that because they know that atheism has no foundation, I mean strong foundation, isa lang ibig sabihin doon. Quoting Dr. Frank Turek, they're stealing from God in order to argue against Him. Kaya kung mapapansin niyo itong mga to, ito, sige, ayan. Dahil nag-request si Ginoong Eli Leon, sige, let's present. Although ito ay na-discuss na natin sa The Whys of Christianity playlist ko. Mamaya or bukas or basta yung naging video ko about yan, The Whys of Christianity from mula sa basic niya. From truth exists, God exists hanggang sa the resurrection of Jesus, i-present natin. So, kung titingnan natin, in addition to the cosmological arguments that points to an infinite supernatural cause of the universe and the teleological argument which shows that the cause is also a super intelligent being. Wait lang ha. Okay. Ayan. So ituloy natin. Let me continue here. The moral argument reveals a God who is morally perfect. Kung titingnan natin, premise 1, every moral law has a moral lawgiver. Premise 2, there is an objective moral law. So therefore, there must be an objective moral lawgiver. So kung titingnan natin yung sinabi ni C.S. Lewis, yung sabi niya, no, na yung kanyang argument against God na about sa pain and suffering and at injustice, ganyan, wala palang basehan. Bakit? Basahin ko yung kanyang sinabi. Just how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? Of course, I could have given up my idea of justice by saying it was nothing but a private idea of my own. Ang point dito ni C.S. Lewis, if God does not exist, ang justice at injustice ay isa lamang opinion. Walang measurement, walang standard, so to speak. Tuloy ko yung sabi ni C.S. Lewis, but if I did that, sabi niya, then my argument against God collapsed too. Like, yung mga birada ng mga atheist friends natin, like, God is guilty in genocide, God is guilty of ganito, God is guilty of ganyan. Pero in reality, they have no moral standards to say that. They have no measurement, so to speak. If I did that, sabi niya nga, take note, si C.S. Lewis ay dating atheist. Okay? Na naging Kristiyano. But anyway, if I did that, sabi ni C.S. Lewis, then my argument against God collapsed too. For the argument depended on saying that the world was really unjust, not simply that it did not happen to please my private fancies. Thus, in the very act of trying to prove that God does not exist, in other words, that the whole of reality was senseless, sabi ni C.S. Lewis, I found I was forced to assume that one part of reality, namely my idea of justice, was full of sense. Kumbaga parang sinasabi rito na sa pag-assume na may katarungan at kawalang katarungan pero walang Diyos, ito'y isang malaking panlilinlang sa sarili. Parang ganun yung point dito. So, bakit kayo masasabi po natin na meron talagang tinatawag na moral law or objective moral values? Una, undeniable yan. At take note, bakit nagre-react po itong mga atheist friends natin? Sige, gamitin natin yung kanilang argument yan. Bakit sila nagre-react about sa pain and suffering? Bakit kinokondena nila yan or whatever? It is because of their reactions. Yung kanilang parang masasabi natin kumbaga, bigla silang nagagalit kasi mayroong nangyayaring, let's say, child trafficking, lying, injustice. We know it by our actions. Ito po yung basis ng human rights. It is the unchanging standard of justice. It defines a real difference between moral positions, so to speak, Mother Teresa versus Hitler. Since we know what's absolutely wrong, like torturing babies for fun is wrong, there must be an absolute standard of rightness. So the moral law is the grounds for political and social dissent. And if there's no moral law, then we could not make excuses for violating it. Kaya nga may mga batas, di ba? Ngayon, kung let's say na tamang atheism, isa lang ibig sabihin yan, if atheism is true, lahat ng mga batas na nakasulat ay pawang opinion lang. Pawang sabi-sabi lamang ng mga tao. Bukod dyan, pasensya na po kung medyo mailaw. There are many reasons there must be an objective moral law. Point 1, we would not know there was injustice unless there were an objective standard of justice. Point 2, true progress is not possible unless we know an objective standard by which we measure that. Third, things are getting better or worse. Sigurado ako yung mga atheist friends natin, aminado. It's either naging better or naging worse. Fourth, real moral disagreements are not possible without an objective moral standards. Point 5, the same basic moral codes are found in most cultures. Point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, guilt from breaking a moral law would not be universal if there were no objective moral law. 7th, even those who deny moral absolutes have moral principles they believe are universal, such as tolerance, freedom of expression, and the wrongness of bigotry and genocide. Di ba yung mga atheist friends natin, alam nila na mali ang genocide. So kahit tanggihan nila na lahat-lahat na may kinalaman sa objective moral law, tapos sasabihin nila na subjective lang daw o ano-ano, hindi po nila maalis sa isipan na ang mga gawi tulad ng genocide ay talagang mali. Na yung tolerance ay maganda o yan ang dapat sanang magawa. Ganon. Freedom of expression. Ganyan. But if atheism is true, tolerance, freedom of expression, and the wrongness of bigotry and genocide are just opinions. Next, we did not invent the moral law any more than we invented mathematical or physical laws. They are discovered, not created. Also, we sometimes choose duty to save a drowning person over instinct, not to risk our own life. Also, the basic moral law is discovered not by how we behave, but by how we desire others to behave towards us. Kahit sino naman, ayaw tratuhin ng masama. Diba? Ganun siya. And acts of altruism cannot be adequately explained naturalistically. Hindi ko na ganong i-discuss tong moral relativism. Maybe I will go on to last part here. But anyway, I guess, tingnan nyo muna to. Lord willing, i-discuss natin yung sa issue ng Exodus 21, especially to the issue of slavery. Nagtanong tayo, anong slavery ba? What do they mean by that? How did they come to that conclusion? Well, that's all for now. Ngayon pa lang. Oh, ito, di niya talaga nagigets to. Proof niya, genocide, slavery, yan ang objective morality. Sigurado ako yung admin nito, nare-recognize niya yung slavery at genocide ay mali. Pero paano niya maipapaliwanag kung walang Diyos? At kung walang objective moral values? Kanina pa po kita inanyayahan, bakit ayaw niyo po dito? Well, sabagay, walang sapilitan yan. Anyway, sabi na naman nito, when God drowned people on Noah's time, or when God killed firstborn, is it objectively right or objectively wrong? Before anything else, let me ask you, Ginoong Eli Leon, na ayaw pumunta sa mismong live dialogue, I have a question. Let's say na tama ka na mali ang Diyos sa ginawa niya, na malunod yung mga tao, although nagbabala na po siya na may paghatol. At ang tanging paraan para makaligtas ay yung daong o arka ni Noah. Okay, sabihin natin na, yun, sige, iset aside natin yun. When God drowned people on Noah's time. Sige. Matanong ko lang, kung sasabihin mong mali, kung sasabihin mong masama ang Diyos, as an atheist, ano bang moral standard mo? Pangalawa, he really missed the point here. Sa totoo lang, he truly missed the point. Hindi yata napansin ng nag-comment na to na bago maganap yung flood, mga 100 taon na habang ginagawa yung daong, if we read Genesis and also 2 Peter as well, si Noah nagbabala sa mga tao tungkol sa darating na kapahamakan. Pero anong ginagawa ng mga tao? Inaakusahan nila si Noah na baliw. Without even realizing na may judgment. So, ito pa. If God is what was called napakalupit na Diyos, dapat kasama sana si Noah sa mga nilipol. Pero hindi. At tingnan naman natin sa konteksto naman, doon sa God killed firstborn. Matanong ko lang, yung ginawa ba niyang yon ay murder? In number 1. Number 2, ano yung context naman may kinalaman dyan? Take note, ang Pharaoh ng Egypt noong panahon na yan ni Moses, he also claimed as like some sort that he claimed to be a God. Nakakala niya siya ang may-ari ng lahat. But when the true God, nung siya ay ano yung tawag dito? I mean, when the true God sent Moses para sabihan ang Egypt, lalo yung hari ng Ehipto, na pakawalan ang mga Israelites. Anong ginawa naman ng paraon? Ilang ulit po siyang nagmatigas. At syempre, bilang warning, nagkaroon ng tinatawag na 10 plagues. Kung saan in the cultural background, by the 10 plagues, tinalo ng Diyos ang mga Diyos-Diyosan ng Ehipto. At concerning naman sa firstborn sons, nabasa ba ni Ginong Eli Leon na yan? Yung tungkol sa Passover? Kung saan ang mga tao, especially Israelites, magkakatay ng isang tupa o kordero na walang dungis. Tapos yung dugo nito ay ipapahid sa bawat pinto. Siyempre, may dumaan na quote-unquote angel of death at naganap yon. O sasabihin, oh, kita mo, murderous. Alam niyo po yung tinatawag na judgment. Siguradong po ako, alam niyo yung tinatawag na capital punishment. No? Pero sige, alisin natin lahat-lahat yan. Alisin natin lahat-lahat yan. If atheism is true, walang tinatawag na objective moral values yan. Kung totoo ang worldview mo, Ginoong Elilion. I-examine mo muna yung worldview mo, kaibigan. Examine nyo muna yung worldview nyo. Kasi most of you, I see still not answering, even though in reality we already answered that already. Pero hindi niya po binisita yung mismong napakalaking problema. Uy, excuse me, andyan pa rin po yung ating StreamYard. Iniimbitahan po kita. Sabihin mo yan. Please. Kasi tingnan nyo, ano according to my objective moral, that's not mine. Napakinggan nyo po ba yung presentation ko? Objective moral values are discovered, not invented. Saan mo nakuha yan? O, ikaw yung gumawa ng tinatawag na straw man. Anong your objective morality? Hello, I did not make this up. At saka ulitin ko, let's say, sige, let's say for example na ganitong tanong ay correct. If atheism is true, ito po ba yung tama o mali? Yan ang kanina ko pang hinahanap kasi ang ginagawa nito at ng iba pa mga atheist friends natin, they're making many assumptions as they think there's a God who is guilty of this and that. Kaso nga lang, in their own worldview, there's no God. So which is which? Diba? So anyway, yung bang ginawa ng Diyos sa pag-exterminate? Let's say, ganun na. Sige, sabihin natin na ganun. Matanong ko lang, ito ba'y nakukonsidera na murder? Hello, my friends. If God exists, He's the author of life. Siya ay may karapatan doon. Tayo mga tao, hindi. Wala. And if Christianity is true, ang buhay ng tao ay hindi natatapos lamang sa lupang ito. So anyway, na-discuss ko na kanina tungkol sa genocide in the Bible na na-discuss natin kanina. At doon sa mga, sigurado ako, sa mga atheist friends na malamang ay manunod mamaya, pakinggan muna ng buo. Okay? Anyway, wag po tayo mag-alala, may part 2 pa po tayo. Hindi pa po tayo tapos dito. Ang haba pa ng mga slides. So anyway, to those who are listening right now, especially to our atheist friends who are listening, let me suggest, bago kayo magbato ng kung ano-ano, can you explain to us why atheism better explains reality? Yan ang lagi kong itinatanong sa inyo. Yan ang lagi naming itinatanong. Why atheism better explains reality? Yun lang. Prove to it by means of evidence. But if you continue to make some sort of funny claims like what our atheist friends did, you're not really atheists. Sorry for that. Excuse me. You're not really atheists. You are anti-theists. You just hated God at all. You just don't like His standards. Unless, if the Lord wills, while you are examining those evidence, mas lalo mo pong maunawaan why it happened. Kasi sa atheism, wala namang ganyang explanation. Kasi ang tao ay parang mga robot na nakaprograma lang if atheism is true. Anyway, yun lamang po sa ngayon. Actually, marami pa sana tayong i-comment. Dapat sana gagawin natin ng 2 hours. But because I have a work to do right now, itutuloy po natin yan bukas. If the Lord wills. Basta abang-abang na lamang sa mga announcements. At sa mga atheist friends po natin na nandito, thank you for being part of this live stream. Bagamat wala man lamang pumasok sa live stream sa StreamYard link natin. Bakit kaya? Sa bagay, mga tao rin naman magpapasya, hindi ako. So anyway, so that's all for today. Thank you so much for listening. Jesus is Lord. See you on the next live stream.